Hey everybody, welcome to our Season 3 Enterprise wrap-up. We are here to wrap up the third season of Star Trek Enterprise, and we asked on the Discord, which you can find via the link down below, in either the podcast link or the YouTube video. There's the Discord channel, and some of the Patreon supporters, the captain level, have a ready room that they can go to, and I asked them for questions. And so we're going to start this off, jumping right into it. I guess first, Clay, how are you?
I'm not bad. Happy to be done with Season 3. Not happy about where we're ending up at the beginning of Season 4.
We're very far, a little behind the scenes, we're very far ahead of the release schedule. We're like a month ahead, just because when Enterprise comes out a week, and we finish the season by the time that what just came out. I think like Countdown just came out or something. Maybe even before Countdown, the one before Countdown. So we're like 4 episodes ahead.
Is it Damage, maybe, or E2?
No, it's what's before. It's is E squared still the one that's out there? It might still be E squared.
I think it's E squared.
And then they get to Countdown, and then it's the finale, and then it's this one. So that makes sense. So those are the 3 episodes. We'll go right to the Discord questions. Jump right into it. Discord people gave us some thoughts and some questions. Kyle Barrett says, I've recently re-listened to some early Season 3 coverage, and the podcast seemed to be hosted by this bright, young, sexy, happy pair of people who are commenting on the momentum the Xindi arc had brought to the show, the greater focus on character, Enterprise having something to say, and even commenting on the Expanse and its distorting anomalies being a metaphor for the radical change and distortion in the now much angrier characters. But now, at the season's end, and Kyle's heard all the episodes because Kyle does the clips for me, those people are nowhere to be seen. What the fuck happened? Clay, what happened to us?
Well, you had 3 kids since the start of Season 3. And that's going to drain you.
It does feel like
and
it, yeah.
Honestly, it drains me just hearing about it. So, no, honestly, I don't know. I think Season 3 does start off with a lot of promise.
Would you agree with the premise of the question? Do you think that we're down in the dumps by the end of it? Exaggeration or not? I don't know. I think we definitely ended in a more negative place than we started. Let's put it that way. I don't know how many clicks away from positive we are on it compared to the first episodes, but yeah, I think I think one of the reasons we did end up being kind of negative at the end is because the beginning of the season had such promise to it, and it became fairly apparent pretty quickly that they were not really going to live up to the potential of what this plot or story brought to the show. They didn't really end up changing that much, and when they did kind of try to get into it, it just kind of dragged and became. They didn't commit to the story. They still tried to be episodic and do this serialized thing, but the serialized thing was really kind of like piecemeal, and they didn't really move the story along that much. And it was just. I think it was a lot of the middle of the season. It starts to drag out the Xindi stuff. And if this season had been 12 episodes, maybe 13 episodes, it probably would be a lot tighter. But that's not how it was done then. So, yeah, there'll be another question. I can just sort of loop them in now at this point. But Matt Ross says if he took out the filler episodes and then comically he lists about half the season: Extinction, Exile, Similitude, Chosen Realm, North Star, Doctor's Orders, and the weaker Xindi plot episodes like Regine, Carpenter Street, Hatchery, would the story be tighter or more interesting? I'm laughing just because it's a lot of episodes to cut out.
Regine, what an episode that again ended with potentially this was going to be a big deal, and then it never came up. Maybe it came up once. I guess she provided the DNA needed to.
She's the reason for
Detroit.
Carpenter Street to happen.
Oh, yeah. Awesome! Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I mean, of course it would be tighter because there are fewer episodes in it, so there's less bloat, so it'll seem better. I think that, people say that this show or this season suffers from a kind of bloat. I think it suffers from a lack of meat on the bone in the first place. And like the bloat is kind of the least of the problems. Like even a lot of people, Mindy on Twitter, some people in the Discord, go back to the fact that if you cut out a lot of these episodes, you'd have an okay story at that point. I think I disagree with that premise. I don't think that the Xindi story is really all that interesting, even if you cut away all the stuff that's like floating around it or tangential to it. I think that like the biggest problem to me, and the reason that what happened to me over the course of the show, is that I think I thought that coming into this, it was going to be reinvigorating for the showrunners and the production staff and everything. I think that it seemed with the amount of different stuff they were starting off the season with, that they would have a kind of excitement about what they were going to do with the season, and that they were maybe be inspired to go in a different direction, and it would shine through in the scripts and the production and everything like that. It's become pretty apparent to me just from the course of reading the oral history, which I read the Enterprise section again, and watching this show and all of our criticisms of the first couple seasons and then the third. There's the trope in the fandom that Braga and Berman killed Star Trek, and I don't know if that's true, but what I do think is that Braga and Berman killed Enterprise from the start. They're a severely disinterested showrunning team on this, and I think that Berman honestly just puts his name on the script. I think that Braga is the one who, judging by how people talk about it, Braga is the one who's actually making all the decisions, and the one who needed to be the sort of voice of where he wanted the show to go. And it just seems that he was burnt out from the start, was told he couldn't do the thing that he wanted to do from the start, and then was like, well, fuck it, I don't feel like trying anymore. And he coasted for 3 years and had a work process that didn't inspire teamwork, and was sort of burning him out because of the amount that he chose to shoulder. He was writing outlines with the writers one-on-one in their room, and all the episodes feel like it's one guy hashing out an outline over the course of the thing. It's like, this is the most generic Star Trek ever. I think that, I don't know if they killed Star Trek, because I think Star Trek was dying at that point anyway from oversaturation. Interestingly, now, as we have 27 active Star Trek shows, that doesn't seem to be the case. But back in the early 2000s, it was the case.
There's no such thing as oversaturation anymore. There's always
there's
always
too
more
many
people looking for stuff to watch.
Yeah, too many options. That's what you saw Darren Mooney's tweet today, right, about people who watch shows on Netflix at like 1.5 speed.
Oh yeah.
I kind of disagreed with his points about. I think that's a product of people having too much stuff to watch. You know, you're like, I got so much to do. I got to just get through this thing to see like what's out there. I think that's the Star Trek problem. But anyway, back to Berman and Braga is just. I don't think Braga ever cared about this show. I think that he didn't care about this season, and I think the main thing that I take away from these first 3 seasons of Enterprise, and this one in particular, is that there was no motivating him at this point. I think that the way that the Xindi arc comes through is a person in charge who's extremely disinterested and being redundant, uninteresting, and incredibly obvious in the stuff that he wants to do as a serial plot, not actually doing a good job with it. But that's my main takeaway here, is that it's a kind of like the interest of the people in charge has a drastic output on what kind of show comes out of it. It's I work in a hospital, and the saying is always the department is driven by the personality of the chief of that department. Like the chief is the one who sort of sets the tone for everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think the Enterprise had a lazy chief and a lazy top of the hierarchy, and resulted in a show that was never going to be anything than just kind of a bland mediocrity, which is what season 3 ended up being.
Well, you can kind of tell that that's what's going on, because once Manny Koto starts to take the reins a bit towards the end, he's actively trying to right the ship to a certain extent. Whether or not he's successful is up for debate, I suppose. But like he's trying to make sense of a lot of stuff
eventually.
Yeah, he's trying to pay stuff off. He's trying to. I mean, that's not to say that Braga wasn't involved in these scripts, because obviously he was. But like I think it's clear, seeing that Manny Koto becomes the showrunner in season 4, that he was taking the reins more towards the end. And while that doesn't necessarily translate into better, quote unquote, better episodes, I think they did translate into more focused episodes, as far as you can see them trying to take the steps with this plot line to at least fucking get through it.
That's what it feels like to me. At the the end is trying to get to the end of the story, really, and that there's not time to do anything with it, which is what we complained about. Like the whole season, the middle episodes aren't really about the Xindi arc outside of it's happening in the background and you're trying to find them. And so when you get to the end of it, there's not really any time to say what this is about. It's that you have to close it out somehow, and you have to destroy this sphere, and you have to get to the end, and you have to get back to Nazi Germany or whatever. And that's the real issue with trying to wrap things up in the past couple minutes of it. I mean, the Xindi are... I don't think the Xindi are Daniels level awful creations, but the Xindi are... The coolest thing about the Xindi might be their name, honestly. Like I like the name Xindi, but I don't think there's anything that I would ever... I can't see the Xindi coming up in any kind of interesting option.
Child number four, Wes, Xindi, Teasdale.
Oh, I mean, Lachlan's first name is Xindi Lachlan. I don't... Like, outside of the most... Trivial Pursuit, Star Trek Trivial Pursuit loaded thing where you're actively hunting for trivia. I don't see why the Xindi would ever be brought up in any kind of conversation or like academic video essay about Star Trek. You know, there's nothing to say about it.
I would disagree with you, Kirk. You have never fought the Xindi from catering.
Extremely dangerous, Kirk. I mean,
honestly. Best possible use of the Xindi outside of this season is Star Trek Beyond.
Because you came into it later, you're like, "Well, the Xindi sound great," and again, that's my thing about their name. Their name sounds cool. The Xindi conflict sounds like a cool conflict.
Yeah, they're cool till you see what they look like.
Do you have any thoughts about the Xindi? I think someone had I think Ray here had with so much time this season, why do you think they spent so little time world building the Expanse and the Xindi? After 20-something episodes, we have no idea of their society or mythology or no real concept of how their civilization lives and functions. The majority of time with them is 5 guys and 1 manatee in the recreation of Bowser's Castle talking about betrayal. The concept of coevolution of sentient species could have been fascinating, and my headcanon is that they were some type of monolithic type event, but it was never really even explored. Nor is it even why they want to remain a unified species, given how little they all have in common with each other. Any thoughts about that or the Xindi in general as a plot device?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they spent so little time world building them, especially because like the core of the season was this new race that we've never encountered before seems to want to destroy us. Maybe we should find out why, and part of doing that is world building and learning stuff about them. But as we said, even going into the end of the season, we learned very little about them until like the last 2 episodes where they had these like major dialogue exposition dumps where they kind of explained the entire history in 45 seconds to a minute of dialogue.
Information that ultimately isn't even relevant to the conflict of the season. It's a lot of like
just
wiki
backstory.
Facts about the Xindi. Yeah.
It's did that episode? Remember the episode where Archer turns into the Neanderthal guy, and he goes back and he sees the destroyed. Did that ever come up again? Didn't they lay that out as though that was some sort of like big turning point for him or something?
Well, that's when he has his first glimpse of we can't treat them like they treated us. Kind of thing.
Okay.
That was supposed
for
to be
some
the
reason
build because he.
I was just gonna say, for some reason, I feel like I in my head I remembered that city being something that was somehow tied to the Xindi plot, but I guess it wasn't. It was just
I don't think so. It's just a
metaphorical thing. Yeah.
It's the land that time forgot. I think that the biggest problem with not world building the Xindi is that, excuse me, to me, not enough time was spent, as Ray says there. The only time you see them is when they're all in Bowser's Castle talking to each other about what they're going to do and what the status of the weapon is and what's going on there. you get glimpses of the fact that they argue with each other. But to me, the only way to really make this Xindi, as they're currently constructed, interesting is that all of the betrayal and sort of infighting that you get in the last couple episodes has to be seen throughout the season to develop the Xindi. I think like you have to get a better sense of the reptilians being active to betraying people. You have to have them treating the Guardians as religious deities, that there's a question about whether or not they should be doing this kind of stuff. And they don't spend any time with them doing that. All they do is those the council chamber scenes where there's nothing interesting being said and you're not really learning anything about them. I think that there is a way to save the Xindi by, throughout the season, you maybe treat Degra like he's the lead of another show that's running in parallel with Enterprise. Like Degra is the Archer version of the Xindi or something like that. And you have Xindi storylines. You learn the names of the main Xindi before the 3 episodes before the finale starts and stuff.
So it gets easier to keep track of them when they all have D names for some reason.
Right. Yeah, the Dolan Jammer, whatever the other guy. And it's not even... The names doesn't matter because the female changeling was called the female changeling. That's the name that they eventually gave her in DS9. It's not that matters, but...
You guys just want to go to lunch? We'll fix this later. Yeah, sure. Female changeling. We'll get that one later. It made it to air? Uh-oh.
We'll get something. We'll think of something over these whoppers. I think that's... I still don't know what the Xindi are outside of that because it comes back to our conflict. There is no conflict with the Xindi outside of this lie that the sphere builders have told them. So I don't know where you'd go with that, but I think that the only way to actually develop something is to know something about those characters. But as the show's done for the past 3 seasons, we don't know anything about Reed, Mayweather, or Hoshi at this point. So to ask them to design a society seems like it's a lot for what Braga was willing to put into it.
Yeah. As much as you can hide through the bombastic acting of the people of the actors in the council room scenes where they just say things very loudly and very theatrically, and it kind of covers up the fact that they're just kind of talking about nonsense. What you don't get is any sense really of what the politics of the Xindi are. So those scenes kind of fall flat and just feel like actors trying to convince you that this stuff is important. Rather than give you any insight into how the Xindi operate or what their society is like. I was thinking about, as you're talking, I think kind of along the same lines as what you're saying about having a parallel show happening. I think the way you could do that is if early on, or maybe like a quarter of the way through the season, maybe halfway through the season, you have one of the Enterprise members get captured by the Xindi. And so you now have an Enterprise human viewpoint who gets brought back to wherever they do their whatever, and you learn about the culture through that character learning about the culture. And then if you want to play that off as though, Hoshi's dead. Well, it turns out Hoshi actually just got captured and she's over. So then you can do that too for like a late season reveal for the other guys or whatever. But yeah, I think definitely what's missing from the Xindi is I feel like they tried to handle it, or they at the beginning of the season, they tried to go at it from like we're going to just give you piecemeal information about the Xindi. So as the season goes along, there's a kind of a mystery or an air of mystery around the Xindi that we kind of like parse out as we go. But they never really did that. They did it for like maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and then it just kind of, I guess they got bored with it or something, or they couldn't figure out how to keep it interesting.
I don't think they knew what the purpose was at that. What you're saying to me is strongly what Star Trek Into Darkness and Discovery and Picard do, which is that there's no point to it, but in order to spur the story to continue, they will just kind of trickle useless information out to you to make you think that something is going to happen from all of this, and it doesn't at the end because it's just a trick to keep your interest. Like what you need at the start of these things, what the new Trek shows need, is that you have to have the core reason for what the Xindi are at the start here, and you can trickle stuff out at that point, but knowing what is going on at the start with them and knowing basically where you're going to end up gives you an idea of what you should feed to the audience at that point, and it doesn't seem so half-assed and be like, well, okay, like now we're just bored and we're going to give up on this because we don't have enough information to give out. I just think that it's the writing of this season strongly reminds me of Enterprise and or of Discovery and stuff, just in how it is all kind of a shell around a hollow experience. And people can maybe dig into that, and you could write a really academic essay about what this all means. But I think at that point you're just digging for something that isn't there in a show that is really not subtle about anything. Like the Enterprise tells you what it's doing, and I think that you could easily find connections and do things like that, and you can go through the intellectual exercise of like looking for reasons that these things are happening. I don't think the show has anything there, and if it did, it would have played it better by the time it got to the end.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you've ever seen the remake of Night of the Living Dead from 1990. It was directed by Tom Savini and written by George Romero, which is why it bums me out more when I think about this, because the original Night of the Living Dead is such a great piece of genre fiction that works well in the political climate that it was created and has a lot of subtext to it that they never really talk about. They never really bring it to the surface. They don't. It's all the information, all the subtext, all the metaphor, if you want to say that, is gleaned from the story that's being told. They're never looking at the camera and saying what's going on. In the remake, which was also written by Romero, there's a scene at the end where the one character whose remains is walking around looking at all the humans treating the zombies like trash, basically, or like they're being as monstrous as the zombies are. And she all but looks in camera when she goes, "They're us. Their zombies are just like us." And it's like, yeah, man, they do
that without words in the original, don't they? There's don't they have at the end of the original? They're piling up the bodies and things like that, aren't they? It's just without stating what the purpose is. Yeah,
right. They shoot the last guy. They shoot the last survivor, and it's this really dark ending or whatever. And it's just like, talk about just hitting the nail with a hammer the size of Jupiter, you know. And I think that's the problem in this show as well. Is like they are not subtle about anything they're doing. They're basically looking into the camera and giving you the theme of the episode, which can become tiring. And just to jump back to the problems with the Xindi real quick, I think they shoot themselves in the foot a bit as well, because the Enterprise crew is essentially playing catch up in a way that the audience they're trying to catch up to the audience, basically, because they present the Xindi to Enterprise as a mysterious entity that, like I said, they're kind of like piecemealing out until they decide they don't want to do that anymore. But the season opens with a Xindi council sequence. So there's really no mystery to the Xindi at that point, as far as like, I wonder what these guys are about. And I feel like those two things don't track with each other, because if you're trying to play it as a mystery about this new mysterious enemy who, you find out that maybe they're not as malicious as you think they are, but then maybe it's just a misunderstanding or whatever. But you also show what they look like. You show the council sequence, the very first thing in the season. Then it just feels like your characters are playing catch up, which is never fun to watch.
Yeah. One of the first things they reveal about the Xindi to the Enterprise crew is that it's the 5 species thing. And the crew talks about that. They're like, wow, what a crazy thing to have 5 different looking guys. Who can tell what a Xindi is? I think that ties into the whole, the Xindi are just exposition Wikipedia factoids instead of like an entity. Yeah. Like it's interesting how opposite they are from the Dominion, because I would argue by the end of DS9, you kind of know relatively little about the Dominion, except for what they think about, like how to go about war and stuff like that. Basically, like you don't know, you don't know anything about like the Jemadar Vorta stuff. Like there's no weird facts that you just learn about these guys outside of like stuff that propels the story. The changelings are still mysterious and just kind of vague shapeshifters that, that's what it is. But Enterprise did the opposite, where they give you a little bit at the start and then they really dump it on you at the end. Just kind of random facts about like the aquatics like to be on time, and they take a long time to decide what they want to do, and it's like the insectoids like to argue, and it's like, okay, like what does this have to do with the story? You're giving me a whole bunch of information, but I just think it's funny how it's a complete opposite, where all you know about the Dominion is what their ethos is and like what they think about reality. And the Xindi, you don't know what they think about reality, but you know what kind of food they all like to eat at the end of the day.
Yeah. It suffers a bit from here's another reference you probably weren't expecting to hear on a Star Trek show. It suffers from this one goes to 11 disease a little bit. If you remember that scene from Spinal Tap, when he says this amplifier, it goes all the way to 11. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then Marty DeBurgi says, well, why don't you just make 10 the loudest, and then that can be the loudest? And then he just kind of looks at him and goes, well, this one goes to 11. So it's not, there's no explanation as for the practical or why that's important or what that means. It's just,
it's just important that
it's just cool that it goes to 11.
Yeah. It's one louder.
Yeah. It's one louder.
Yeah. I think that is the problem with them. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised based on, and I know it's a Star Trek-y, it's like Twitter Star Trek stuff, but the Xindi were kind of a known quantity to me before this. Like the name, I knew the name, and I knew that they had a season dedicated to them. So I'm honestly surprised by the time we got to the end of this how lacking in development they are. Like they're probably, for the amount of screen time, one of the least developed species that the show has ever created, and which is really kind of startling. You get more out of, like, obvious ones are like Bajorians, Cardassians. Like the Borg have more in their 5 appearances or whatever than that. Like there's a lot done in that amount of time. I feel like one-off alien species you get more about, like the Inner Light aliens. They made a thing to remember their culture by, and they implant the memory into people's lives and make them live on forever. It's like the Xindi are just like, they like to argue. What are you going to do? They like to show up on time. It's like, well, all right, see ya. Bye. The reptilians.
Don't get in the middle of a Xindi argument, because you'll be there all day. Those reptilians. Ugh.
Even the reptilians are just mustache-twirling villains. I think the show makes an effort at saying they're devout, but I think that even by the end of the last episode, the reptilians are no longer devout. They are, we want to be in charge. We want to win. Yeah. And so we're going to do this mission.
Honestly, it would have been more interesting if Degra's buddy, or the Wolfman-looking guy, ended up turning on the Enterprise or something, and not make the ones who look evil be the evil ones. Like...
Yeah, a little bit of surprise there.
Yeah, it would have been something different, or you could get into some ethos from that angle if you wanted to, or whatever. I don't know. It's just, it plays out so fairly predictably as far as who the bad guys are, and yeah, I don't know.
I guess we can talk about the Enterprise crew before we wrap up and everything. So what we learned about the Enterprise, because we talked about the Xindi and the general sense of failure of this season as a arc, or at least I consider it to be a failure. I think the strongest stretch of this episode was from Azadi to Forgotten, which is where the ship gets attacked. Then it's damage is the middle episode where T'Pol's drug addiction comes into play, but like the ship being damaged is kind of neat. And then the Forgotten episode, which is what we consider to be one of the strongest ones, which is Trip having dreams about his sister and the dead crewman that he has to write the letter for and everything like that.
Yeah,
that was good. What's tough is you can't really stretch that stuff into a season, so it feels appropriate that it's like a 3-episode arc in the middle of the story. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything else going on. Kyle here asks, Clay, quick, I'll just do it because I was thinking about it. Clay, name a scene with Mayweather this season. What's the first Mayweather scene that pops in your head?
Where he has dialogue, or just...
He has to do something, I suppose. Yeah, so maybe dialogue is be the...
Oh, when when in the dream episode, when T'Pol takes over the ship, I think he gets blown up, and then he's not in the rest of the episode.
In the alternate future,
the alternate
right,
time, the alternate future, I think he gets blown up. Yeah, a scene with Mayweather where he actually, I think at one point, I think in one of the last couple episodes, he gets an order, and I think he turns and he goes, "Are you sure?" And then he goes, "Follow the order," and then that's it.
That he does. That is one. The first one that popped in my head, and there's a few more as I think about it, but the first one that popped in my head is he was present in the when him and Hoshi were talking in E Squared about why Reed doesn't have a family in the future.
Yep, he was, yes.
He's not a key cog to that, but he is in that scene talking to Hoshi. I remember
he made
him
sure to find out exactly who he had chances with when it came down to hitting the sheets.
He narrowed down the field by looking at the future timeline and deciding what he was going to do. The Makos kicked the shit out of him in one episode. He was like the training dummy. they beat
That's
up
right.
to show their dominance. Outside of that, he dies in Twilight, and he doesn't even transform in stuff like Extinction. He's not like I don't know what he does in Extinction, but he's nowhere. He's not on the planet.
What
it's
a
good
man.
question, but
just such a. I still get annoyed that they went and created Daniels instead of taking someone like him and giving him something interesting to do. As much as I hate Daniels, if you replaced Daniels with Mayweather, it makes it like 100 times better, even if it still sucks.
Yeah,
at least it's in house, you know.
It's in house. It gives Mayweather something to do. We pick on Mayweather, but I think Hoshi suffers the same fate. Hoshi has her get kidnapped plot, but what else does Hoshi do in this season? Reed
doesn't she go and live with the Beast, or is that season 2?
Oh, that is this season. Exile. She lives with the Beast, so she has a story, I guess.
Doesn't Mayweather get a whole episode with him and his family, or is that season 2?
Season 2. That's season 2. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't get anything. Hoshi gets a few. I think Reed gets the middle amount out of everybody because he has his psychosexual tension with Hayes before Hayes dies. And then he takes over the Makos and frees Archer or whatever at the end. Where do we stand on with the cast at this point? I think this is the weakest collection of characters after 3 seasons that any Star Trek show has had. Like, easily.
I think the actors are all decently good for the most part. Like, I think Bakula's miscast, but I don't think he's a bad actor. Trip is very good. What the hell? Jolene Blaylock is good as T'Pol for the most part. Reed is good. Hoshi's good. Mayweather's good. They don't have a lot to do, so maybe it's tough to tell whether or not they can.
It is tough to tell
how much they can do. But I think as far as acting talent, it's probably one of the stronger casts overall. Although now
I would
that
say
I'm looking at the other casts,
it's a kind of a law of averages. I would say that none of them are standouts in the way that I see standouts in the other casts.
Yeah,
like Rene Auberjonois, stuff like that. There's not really a Picard. Well, it's tough because the TNG made up for, I don't want to say lack of talent because everybody on that show did what they did very well, but there's only one Patrick Stewart on that show, and there's Spiner. I would say Spiner.
Brent Spiner, yeah. But everybody else made up for it by having interesting characters for them. You know what I mean? Like they gave them stuff to do. They differentiated them. They all had their own personal quirks and storylines and things that they were into, which goes a long way. I mean, you can have the greatest actor in the world on Enterprise if he's playing Mayweather. Right. You know, you can have Daniel Day-Lewis play Mayweather. It wouldn't come across that you're watching Daniel Plainview here, you know?
I would love to see Daniel Day. The show stays exactly the same. It says Daniel Day-Lewis.
Here's a question.
Giving the most incredible reads of Yes, Sir.
Here's a question for you and for the crowd. Actually, Daniel Day-Lewis was in The Bounty, the Mutiny and the Bounty movie with Mel Gibson and Anthony Hopkins. Probably the closest he'll ever be to being in a Star Trek movie, and he was good in that.
Yep.
But if you had to put Daniel Day-Lewis on Star Trek in some fashion, is he a Starfleet guy, or is he a villain, or is he a friendly alien like a Vulcan or something?
I'd love to see his Vulcan. I think he would be. When you started saying it, I was thinking he has to be an officer somehow. I'm trying to think where he would fit. I think he'd be a great chief engineer for some reason.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
I think he'd be a really good engineer character. I don't know why. I might be thinking a lot of Daniel Plainview. Like, I imagine him talking like that.
I would love a Star Trek with Daniel Plainview as the engineer of the starship. coming up with all sorts of milkshake-based metaphors for why the warp core is overheating.
It's just a long, extended scenes of the camera focusing on him as he explains how he's going to fix their oil digging technology to this town, and people are just in the background. The captain and everyone else is sitting off
I've abandoned my ship. I've abandoned my ship.
I'm finished. Where do you think he would fit in? Would you want him to be I was thinking admiral, but I think he's... I don't think an admiral is right for him. It's an interesting question, though.
He's tough because, like, I feel like he could be a good Starfleet officer, but I almost feel like you're wasting him at that point. Because, like, would you?
Yeah.
I think Daniel Day-Lewis playing a Vulcan would be the best Vulcan you've ever seen in your life. It might actually be like too good for the screen because I mean he could probably still emote and get across so much without actually showing emotion.
Freebasing.
Yeah, without freebasing. Yeah. I think he would be a fantastic villain as well. Like if you had he was a Romulan or a Klingon or something, that would be fantastic. Cardassian.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel
he would be amazing.
He'd be a good Cardassian. Yeah.
Next movie. I hope Matt Shackman is listening to this. Chris Pine, era cast, Daniel Day-Lewis as Gul Dukat or a similar Cardassian.
Oh, the mirror Kelvin version of Dukat or something like that.
Yeah.
What it would be like? It would be Ducat's father or something. That would make some weird connection there.
Yeah.
I could see that. I think that'd be good. The Cardassians are just wrong for the Kelvin universe, aren't they? They're like they're not the right ones, unfortunately, which is too bad.
I'm telling you. Kelvin Crew versus the Borg. You printing money.
That's what those movies are.
You're printing money.
Yeah, that's what those movies. Kyle says, "Remember when they spent an episode taking apart a reptilian gun that shoots boogers and it never came back?"
That's true,
I do remember that. What is shocking?
I want to know how it works. Damn it!
I would have bet my life at that point that they were going to develop technology to beat the Xindi that way. And it's really
anti-Xindi booger technology.
It's just like a salt gun. You know those guns that shoot salt to take out bugs or something?
Oh, yeah.
It'd just be that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that would work great against the insectoids.
I mean, honestly, we should go back and revise that podcast because we were operating under the assumption that spending 20 minutes of an episode taking apart a gun was going to amount to something down the line.
You would think so.
I should dock at a point. Yeah, I don't remember what episode that is. I don't know. I don't think there's any other questions. I put up the slates, just the series Xindi. I don't believe you mentioned the fact that in season 1 is when we hear Reed mention his love of T'Pol's rear end. And this season, we finally get a glimpse of it. Did the writers foreshadow its appearance? Is it a Chekhov's bum? It is. It is a Chekhov's bum. Was that Jolene Blaylock's ass, too? I don't think that's ever been...
I don't know. I've never asked her. I'll ask her the next time I see her.
I'll have to check on Memory Alpha. That's pretty much it for the questions. I don't think anyone else had anything to say about it. But we're also, again, ahead of schedule, so people don't really know what our thoughts are. We can quickly go through the best and the worst of the season. We won't break this down. But based on our rankings, Clay, averages, best episode, can you remember?
The best episode, I feel like, is probably the one with Trip where he has to write the letter. If I had to pull it out of thin air. No?
This is the problem with our ratings. When we got to that one, we said that was the best. But you gave Similitude a 5, which caused us to... Similitude takes the first spot in this.
Which one is that?
Here's something that... the clone. Sim.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one, too. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have it ranked Similitude. Number 2 is The Forgotten, which I would say is my favorite, but we're going by the number ranking here. So Similitude, The Forgotten. 3 is Damage. 4 is Proving Ground, which is the one where Shran shows up for the first point in the Expanse, and they get into that argument with him. And then 5 is the cowboy one, North Star. Interestingly, that sneaks in as our number 5.
Number
worst.
5.
Do you remember
best?
what the? Those are the 5 best.
Really?
Similitude, The Forgotten, Damage, Proving Ground, and North Star.
Oh, I'm thinking of Marauders. I was like, how the fuck did that get in the top 5?
That's our worst from the previous season. Well, do you know what the worst episode is this year?
Marauders is this Magnificent 7 episode, right?
Yeah, which is in the second season. We gave it the worst.
Okay.
That's the second worst of our second season episodes. Yeah.
The worst of this season.
We both gave it a 1. It's the only one that we both gave 1s this episode. There have been 4 1s in Enterprise. We gave 3 in a row in Season 2. In Season 3, got 1 from both of us.
Is it the egg juice episode?
No, we talked about it earlier. Regine paid it off slightly.
Oh, Carpenter Street.
Carpenter Street.
Yeah.
Carpenter Street was our worst one. We both gave it a 1. After that, this is where we get kind of interesting. There's a little bit we can talk about. I gave it to 0 Hour because looking at the other contenders, 0 Hour is the finale that we just did.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones, looking back, I would have rather watched all of the other ones again than 0 Hour.
Really?
I was really bored by 0 Hour. So some examples are Extinction, I put after it, which is the alien shape-changing, turned into aliens episode on the planet.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay.
The Hidden City episode.
Mm-hmm.
Exile, which is the Hoshi episode, where she meets the alien.
Mm-hmm.
And then Regine would be number 5, because that one was just kind of boring. It's some order of those. The other options would be Hatchery and Doctor's Orders, but I thought that both of those were more memorable. Hatchery is the egg one, and Doctor's Orders is the one where everyone goes to bed and Phlox is awake on the ship.
Right, yeah.
I think it's the same problem we had as last year, which is that I can easily pick the best and the worst all kind of blend together for me on this show.
Yeah.
But that's it. Carpenter Street is the worst. 0 Hour, Extinction, Exile, and Raisin. Here's the thing to talk about. I gave it 2.64 Season 1, 2.73 Season 2, and Season 3 for me gets a 2.83 average score, so it's the best of the Enterprise seasons. You went 2.68 in Season 1, 2.73, the same as me in Season 2. We both had the same score. Here's what's interesting about your scores in Season 4. You gave it a 3.13. You jumped significantly higher in Season 4.
Okay.
Like statistically significant a leap here. It's the equivalent of changing something like 8 episodes 1 level higher than you did in Season 3.
Okay.
Would you stand by that? Does that seem right to you? Is this season a drastic improvement over Enterprise? Is this the best season of Enterprise?
Is this probably yes. I would say yes. Yeah, I think it's the first season where they're kind of allowed to do anything with the characters, even if they're kind of taking a while to do it. But I think the stuff that to be fair, it's not even they don't even do stuff with all the characters. It's basically just Trip and T'Pol that they're doing stuff with.
Angry Archer.
I think yeah, Archer and Reed, pulling up the rear there. I think
I'd say all unsatisfying. Yeah, I don't think any character this season I'd go, that was a good arc for that person. I think Trips is the most complete, but I wouldn't even be like, wow, that was profound or that was interesting. I wouldn't say that about his arc.
Trip almost sticks the landing, but doesn't quite get there. But the other ones just kind of trip over the vaulting bar a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the stuff they do with Trip is great. But yeah, it's not. I wouldn't call it a full arc because it doesn't. I mean, it kind of gets there, but It feels like it's a little bit forced when he just kind of like changes his mind after talking to Degra for 5 minutes. But it's still more.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's still more character work than really anybody gets to do in either of the other seasons up to that point.
I think I posted on the Discord or Instagram or something, but in the oral history, Kodo takes a swing. He's like, what I would do differently in season 3. He's like, I think all the character motivations were wrong. I don't really know what Reed was thinking, and Archer was angry all the time, and Trip was just whatever he was. But his idea to fix season 3 was he would have had Trip be the angry character instead of Archer. And so Trip is the one who, an anomaly, threatens to throw the guy out of the airlock because he's like, tell us where this Xindi is. And Archer has to run in and be like, Trip, this isn't how we do things like this.
Right.
And eventually, over the course of the season, the ship would splinter into 2 factions, which is a mutinous section led by Trip, and then Archer trying to hold control of the... So, and the way that we would talk about, Trip would almost become the leader of the Mako crew, who are more militaristic and sort of focused on the end goal. And Archer would be the one in the other side. That's clearly a better way to fix this, because a lot of the character motivations this season are just not defined, or like there's... It comes back to the laziness of it. It's like Archer's angry, but what does that mean? What does that accomplish anything? Trip is angry at the start, but he kind of mellows out until we need to remember that his sister died, and then he gets angry again at the very end of Degra, and we close things out like that. And the final point about the laziness of it is that I think Kyle was saying earlier that Enterprise's 3rd season arc actually ends in the Council, which is 2 episodes before the end. So we have 2 episodes of action that wrap everything out. And the Council is where Archer shows up and he talks to the Xindi and they work out their problems, and then it's like, oh, here's the true villainy that's coming through. I would agree with that. I would just say that it speaks to the problems of the season for me, that the resolution with Archer talking to the Xindi is so forgettable and boring that there's nothing there for him to do. And what should be a moment of catharsis, and Archer gives a great speech in the middle of the council room floor or whatever, and all the Xindi stand up and applaud or something like that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anything to say. I don't think Bakula is the right character to do it, but it's also Archer as a character doesn't have anything to say to them that's motivating or emotional or anything.
They just insert that gif from Endgame of the Hulk going, time travel!
Just hands out. That's true. It's true. I don't think I have anything else to say about that. Was that leading to a question? I can't remember where we were. Oh, just the characters. If you have any final thoughts about the characters, I guess that's it. Otherwise, we're done.
I don't ever want to see Daniels ever again.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't come back. I hope not.
He's terrible. We talked about that in the
bad.
previous episode, so we don't need to rehash it, but he's a real awful character.
Again,
the Temporal Cold War is
like
2
another,
episodes left.
Ugh. It's just another example of something where it's like, all right, here's kind of a cool idea that we had from the start. Can't wait to see what we do with this. And then it's like, oh, shit, we get nothing. And then it just kind of limps along because they have to do stuff with it for some reason.
It's really obvious when there's no... It's interesting because I know that we were talking about like people like Sean Cordy, like when the series are all plotted out before that, and like the scripts are at least outlined or whatever, and you know what you're going to do. Yeah. I don't feel... Would you agree that a lot of modern shows, even like network shows, I never get this sense of purposelessness in things that are introduced in shows these days. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like this is...
Yeah.
Would you say that they still stick around in bad ones? I think even in bad ones, I feel like when they introduce something, there's like a purpose to they understand where this is going to go, even if it's like a terrible thing that they decide to do with it. But in these Enterprise and early 90s syndicated shows, I feel like there's a lot of examples of just they throw something in with no idea what they want to do with it, and it's really obvious that they don't know what they want to do with it, and it just kind of falls by the wayside. It's probably just a byproduct of the production where they didn't really have a break between things. But I feel like it's one of the ways that TV has drastically improved is that there doesn't seem this kind of randomness to the way that things are introduced into shows anymore.
Yeah, I honestly don't know because I wonder if just they're just better at hiding it. because I remember I was listening to Damon Lindelof talking about Watchmen, and Watchmen, I might have mentioned this the last time we were talking about this kind of thing. Watchmen seems like the kind of show that was all written beforehand, like they had everything mapped out, but apparently that was not the case. And they introduced this idea of Jeremy Irons' character in this other place, and eventually he has to get back to where all the action's happening. And they introduced this element in the first episode that ends up being the route, at least partially part of the route that gets him to where he needs to go in the finale. And they didn't know that when they introduced this element in the first episode. It was just something that they were kind of trying to figure out, okay, shit, how the hell do we get him back to where he's got to go? Oh, wait, we've got this thing that was there the whole time looking at us right in the face, and it just clicks in. So I don't know if they're just better at hiding it, or just maybe because that's why I wonder, when you get shows like this or that do this kind of stuff, it always feels like they maybe this is kind of what you're saying. It feels like they know what pieces they want to look at harder, but they don't necessarily know why they're looking at them so hard, if that makes sense. So, like, they're laying some stuff out. You mean
in a good example or a bad, like a good example of that working, or like an Enterprise example or a Watchmen episode example?
I would say either way. I mean, just this idea of you're talking about modern shows. They put things out there with more purpose than they did previously. I wonder if it's just like they are playing a game of Clue, and they know what the pieces are. They know the rooms. They know the murder weapons. They know the characters, but they don't know exactly how those things all go together yet. And so they know the stuff they're going to lean on. They know the stuff they're going to focus on. They know the stuff they're going to call out. It's like, all right, something's going to happen with this. We'll figure it out later, but this is the thing we want to introduce. So I think there's probably a better handle on that stuff now maybe than there was before. But it is so different, though, because that stuff really only comes up in an era of serialized shows, which when Enterprise was on, it was fairly still not very well-worn territory as far as that's. I mean, it was more well-worn than it was in 1992 when X-Files and Twin Peaks were on.
Yeah,
but
TNG and everything.
Yeah. But it's still, I think we're so. It's such the norm at this point to tell those kinds of stories that it's kind of difficult. I think they're just more used to playing with those elements than they used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably true. It's just it makes it. Yeah, I guess another way to look at it would be like maybe at the dawn of this stuff in shows that were like Enterprise doing 20-something episodes a season, there was also working from the old understanding of maybe the audience just won't pay attention to this because they're not used to tracking things, for a long time. So it's like, we just brought it, just forget it. Like, don't even write about it anymore. Where in an era of lower episode counts in a season, and I would argue probably smarter audiences, at least in terms of like how they watch TV, like, or what they expect from TV, it's unforgivable at this point to do what Enterprise did with something like Archer's characterization, or Trip's like lack of motivation for an extended period of time to go into things like that. That seems to be what it would be.
Especially now.
It's good. It makes it better.
Especially now, I think one of the unfortunate, or maybe, I don't know, it depends on how much you enjoy this stuff. One of the byproducts of the era we're in now is that you can't let the camera hang on any detail without people assuming this is an integral part of the story that's going to come back in some form later. Even if it's the most inconsequential thing, that becomes the key to everything. And it's I find that to be a bit tiring personally, because I'm the kind of person who just likes to let the story hit me and then I can digest it later. But people seem to really enjoy
the modern
that.
Treks are so tiring because it's constant speculation. I mean, some shows bring it on themselves. I think the show can be clear about whether or not it's setting up a mystery or not. I think that shows are capable to do that to the audience, and I think that some shows like Discovery wants you to think there's a mystery, so they will hang on things like that and make you speculate about what that would be, and it's kind of unfair and tiring, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference of things. I guess we're done with that. Season 3 of Enterprise. We're on to Season 4, the final season of Star Trek Enterprise. We're almost done with it. A new showrunner, Manny Koto, takes over. We have a couple episodes. We have a two-parter opening up the next episode, Stormfront Part 1 and 2. We're going to be covering it in one podcast.
Wait,
because that's...
I'm sorry. I was gonna make a joke about the modern use of the term Stormfront, but then I realized it's because of the way they use it in
that's
this.
That's what it is.
Yeah, referential to the Nazis, yeah.
It is. We got Nazis. So we're going to be doing our new rule, which is old because... I don't know. We haven't had a two-parter in Enterprise yet.
Oh,
which
sure.
is why
yeah,
it feels like that we haven't done this in a long time. But Enterprise doesn't do two-parters, really. Except for the Season 1 and 2. The season ender of 1 into 2 was a two-parter, but we always break those up into two sections anyway. So 2 episodes of Stormfront, and then they go home after that. It's the title of the episode, Home.
Cool.
And then there's like 18 episodes in the 4th season, so it's pretty short. That's it. Star Trek Enterprise's 3rd season is done. Support the show at patreon.com/thepensky-file if you're so interested. We will have... When is this coming out? This comes out like mid-August. So we'll be talking about our plans for coverage of Star Trek coming up, the new shows and everything like that. We'll make a decision about how we're going to do that. You guys will be aware at this point because we'll probably let you know. And I guess that's it for me. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
We'll keep on trucking with Rotten Horror Picture Show, excuse me, and Badass. Badass is going to be, I think it's going to be a shorter season. We're almost, at least recording wise, over the halfway point. There's only a handful of episodes left, and then I think we'll be on to Batman Beyond in some form. I haven't decided how much of a break we're going to take after we're done, but yeah, we'll do the usual thing. We take a break, do a mid-season special episode or whatever, movie or whatever. And
how many episodes
then
is
probably
Batman Beyond? Is that like a full TV show?
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 seasons, I think. It's a solid run. Yeah. So
you'd be you can do a movie or something. People on Patreon, I think, I don't know if I told you this, so I apologize if I didn't. They were interested in the Batman movies, like the starting with 89 into the Schumacher era and stuff like that. So yeah. Just to put that out for you, if you wanted to use one or two of those as a break in between seasons.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, I think that's territory we haven't. We've danced around that stuff a lot, but we've never actually covered it. So I think that would be fun to do. So, and then Ron Horror's out there. Mm-hmm. What's the next Ron Horror? I think you said it. Jennifer's Body's this, and you'll have one more, I think, after that. Jennifer's Body should be out at this point, and then American Werewolf in London is the one after that. And we are still continuing our Friday the 13th series on Patreon. This month we covered Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, or Jason Takes Vancouver via a boat from... For some reason, Crystal Lake has an outlet into the Atlantic Ocean, which can get them to New York, Manhattan. Yes. Is that guy's name Kane Hodder who plays? Yes. Is that his name? Yes. Look at his Wikipedia. Fantastic name for just like it's a character name. That's sounds like a character in one of these movies. It's like, oh, you haven't heard the legend. That's who Daniel Day-Lewis would play. Yes, he played Kane Hodder on the Cardassian gull. Kane Hodder. I was looking at his Wikipedia page. He's apparently, I don't know if this would devastate your opinion, he's apparently a huge juggalo. Loves Insane Clown Posse. Is he really? No kidding. Goes to their concerts all the time, and it's on his Wikipedia, so it must be true. Good for him. I don't know. Remember the innocent days of about 5 or 6 years ago when the Juggalos were classified as like a gang or something. A gang. They made the Southern Poverty Law Center's terrorist organizations. Yeah, that was a terrorist organization. Yeah, God, longing for the days when the only thing we had to worry about were Juggalos.
like Eminem feuded with them for a little bit. Like, I don't know how you consider that a feud. His rap was a million times superior to whatever the fuck Insane Clown Posse spat back out at him. But yeah, they're just they have staying power though. I don't know any juggalos, so I don't know where it comes from. I don't know.
They've got their fans, and their fans seem to be very, very
dedicated,
intensely loyal to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, good and bad, I suppose. A lot of it should have been the first inkling of the populist revolution we've been going through in the past 5 years.
The only way to make this DePaul storyline is after she starts smoking crack and just listens to Insane Clown Posse. She walks onto the bridge.
The next time they're having dinner in Archer's place, she asks the computer for a glass of Faygo.
Little subtle hints. Just drop in the pop culture. Because I'm sure they were around when these episodes are coming out.
Yeah, she starts calling Captain Archer my ninja.
You know a lot about the Insane Clown Posse, Clay. I'm gonna end the show right here before we get ourselves in trouble.
That seems like something a show like Lower Decks would do. Like, if you imagine the idea of being that far into the future and looking back into the past history of Earth, having a character like T'Pol clue in on something ridiculous like the Insane Clown Posse.
I think Lower Decks would be we always make fun of how Star Trek just sticks with like royalty-free music at this point, but like Lower Decks can be like the finest music of the era was the Insane Clown Posse, whose records have lasted and spread throughout the galaxy at this point. And it's like you see a whole planet full of juggalos like painted with their faces up and stuff like that. Like, that
would be amazing.
Why not?
Yeah,
the writers are scared of the terrorist organization known as Clown Posse or whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hear from all three of our ICP listeners, I would assume, at this point.
Big wrestling fans,
because I don't know anybody. Yeah, they like wrestling.
Yeah.
Been watching a lot of wrestling on YouTube recently.
The
biggest
old stuff?
thing I've learned, Attitude Era, my era.
Sure, yeah.
Biggest thing I've learned, I undervalued Kurt Angle, who is possibly a 5-tool wrestler, and I was unaware that he was maybe the greatest wrestler that I was watching while he was in WWE.
Yeah, he was good.
He could do the promos. He could wrestle. He could talk on the mic. His song was great. He had a great entrance.
Yep. He fully
Everything
embraced the entire crowd chanting "You suck" at him in time with his song.
It was so good. He was there the entire time. He never changed his gimmick. He was still the same thing the entire time, and it lasted and it worked the entire time. You suck got a little bit of annoying, but he was he wrestled, and Andy was he's like in basketball. It's like the 5-tool guy who can defend anybody. It's like a center who can defend a point guard is highly versatile and necessary and like very useful. He could wrestle small guys. He could wrestle big guys, and it all looked believable for it. Like, he was good.
Well, I mean, he was a legitimate gold medalist wrestler.
Yeah, athlete.
He was the real deal.
Yeah, legitimate athlete.
Yeah.
Hasn't aged well now. Now he looks strange. He's like all body. He has these little spindly arms and legs, and he's all body. It's really weird looking.
He walks like a marionette now. Like he's got like a certain like frozen bend to his arms and legs where he just.
I think he's broken. I think it's
big time.
Physically he's thick bodied. Yeah, but he has these tiny little arms and legs at this point. Yeah, big neck and stuff. I don't know if I don't want to draw any conclusions, or if it was just a byproduct of his. Maybe that's his natural frame that allowed for actual wrestling to be good at.
We watched, a couple of years ago at this point. You ever see the movie Warrior with Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy as the MMA brothers?
It sounds familiar. I don't think I've seen it though.
It's a good movie, and they fight this guy. This like the big bad of the top cage guy that they have to fight in this tournament is this Russian dude. He's a big Russian dude, and I'm watching this. I'm going, man, he kind of looks like Kurt Angle. It is Kurt Angle, and he is terrifying in that movie. Like, I don't know what he did to his body, but he like just shredded himself in a way where he looked just enough different, or maybe it was old enough that I was only familiar with like modern Kurt Angle, but it took me like 2 or 3 scenes with him to realize it was actually Kurt Angle.
Is he playing a Russian accent or something?
Yeah, he's got like 2 lines.
Yeah, okay, he's just pretending to be Russian.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, he was a good wrestler. Good wrestler in the sense of just the 5-tool player for everything. I underappreciated him.
Not to keep this wrestling podcast on our Star Trek show going, but the Attitude Era is really interesting because I saw on Twitter one time years ago someone asked the question, can you think of a modern modern media format or outlet that has become less violent as time has gone on? And I immediately thought wrestling, absolutely, because at a certain point, I think when the company went public, WWE very much turned into like a PG type show for the most part. And if you look at what they do now versus what they were doing in the Attitude Era, holy shit, they were doing absolutely everything they could to get a rise out of people in multiple ways. And it's just like I can't even imagine them doing anything like that now.
I was watching the algorithm just pointed me towards the sort of promo post match thing where the Austin created his like 316.
Oh, sure.
Thing.
Yeah.
And the context of it is he beats Jake the Snake Roberts, whose gimmick at that time was, I guess he was a born-again Christian who was like a Bible thumper and would sort of come to the ring and try to evangelize and convert each other. Mm-hmm. But Austin's promo is basically making fun of evangelicals for a couple minutes and then just being like, you can come down here toting your John 3:16. Well, Austin 3:16 says I just whooped your ass. And it's like, I wouldn't say it's offensive, but I was like, wow, this is like somewhat edgy for that kind of like that time, especially that time, because that was early 90s. That was like the height of, I think the U.S. is more sensitive to that stuff at that point.
Like, I think 96, 97, sometime in there.
Yeah.
It's actually later than it seems.
Start of the Attitude, okay, because that's the start of Stone Cold's arrival, basically.
Yeah, but that stuff, like, I think that was another instance of something works, but they took the wrong lesson from it. And so, well, I mean, I guess it kept working, but they ended up grasping on to the more sensational stuff without the as much quality of performer or matches and stuff as you had with Austin and The Rock and stuff like that. So you ended up getting like really crass, weird ass shit going on in the early to mid 2000s and stuff. Like there was a whole storyline that was born out of real life where Matt Hardy and Lita had been a longtime couple. This is real life. And then Lita was cheating on Matt Hardy with Edge. And so then they broke up, and then she was with Edge, and then they worked it into the storyline and had Edge and Lita betray Matt Hardy and then, like, celebrate by having sex in the middle of the ring. And it's, like, one of the most awkward things I've ever seen in my life. And to hear them both talk about it, they were like, this is the most awkward thing we've ever done in our entire life. And it's, like, I can't imagine them doing anything like that now.
Yeah. I was watching...
Like, they literally had a bed set up in the middle of the ring.
In the ring.
And, like, they were supposed to get under the covers and start throwing their clothes off and shit. And it's like, you're capitalizing on a legitimate relationship betrayal.
The greatest moment ever was, I remember watching it was, like, Boss Man and Big Show.
Oh, the best. The best.
In the world of wrestling, like Big Show's father dies and he's at the funeral, and Boss Man runs up and hitches the casket of the dead father's body to like the back of his
unbelievable
Chevy 77 and drags the coffin off.
Unbelievable.
And Big Show runs after
good.
it and jumps onto it and rides this coffin down through the cemetery as he's being pulled.
Yep. Fantastic. Every now and then you get one of those and you just have to stand up and clap.
I remember that thinking just like, wow, they're really... It was also when I was like, wow, they're really trying to push Boss Man here. Like, I don't know if this is Boss Man's time, but they want to really when your finishing move is I'll lift my leg and you can run into my foot. It's not the best era. Although, to close it out, I was watching modern stuff, and I guess I'm ignorant to it now, but I was watching just clips of like recent Royal Rumbles, and I only know 1% of the people who are coming out of down the ramp during the Royal Rumble. Everyone else couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. Yeah, and I know I'm familiar with the Attitude guys, but like I was watching the Attitude stuff, I was like, all these guys have really like unique gimmicks, at least. Like everyone who was coming down in the recent Royal Rumbles was like semi-attractive guy in boxer brief stuff, you know, like shaved chest. Like it's like they all kind of look the same to me, and I was like, I don't know what any of these guys are all about.
I remember noticing that in the era that I stopped watching, which was like, I guess they call it the Ruthless Aggression era, which was like when John Cena and Randy Orton and those Batista and all those guys came up. And I remember throwing it on from time to time, thinking the same thing, where it's like, these are all just guys with normal names who just aren't wearing clothes. And they all just kind of run together in your brain now, because it's not like Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or Mankind. Undertaker. It's John Cena, Randy Orton, Dave Batista. They're just guys, you know, big muscly guys. That all kind of runs together.
Yeah. So it is because now I think that those guys are semi-iconic. That's like the last of the group that I recognize as wrestlers. And I don't know. We're done. Thank you very much for listening to our wrestling podcast. We're over with Star Trek Enterprise, all the other shows, thepenskyfile.com, patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you want to support us there. We are done with Enterprise Season 3. We'll see you in Season 4. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you later.